Hey, this is Neely Quinn from the TrainingBeta Podcast, and this episode that you're going to listen to right now is actually on the Struggle Climbing Show, which is hosted by Devlin. Ryan was kind enough to give me a copy of our interview to publish on the TrainingBeta Podcast as well, but he had me on his show to talk about perfectionism in climbing and how it affects climbers, what I see commonly among my mindset coaching clients. And we did some coaching on Ryan for his perfectionism. And I talked about how perfectionism is actually not necessarily a bad thing and how we can sort of leverage it and make it not so controlling in our lives. So we're going to talk for about an hour and a half about this topic. I loved this conversation. I love talking about this stuff. If you have your own mindset challenges in climbing, I would love to help you. I am taking a couple new clients right now, and I do one-on-one Zoom sessions with people from all over the world. And we talk about things like fear of failure, fear of falling, comparison with others, just having really high expectations of yourself, and not having fun in climbing. So you can find that at trainingbeta.com/mindset, and hopefully I will work with you soon. But without further ado, here's the interview that Devlin did with me on the Struggle Climbing Show, and here we go.
I'm really excited to be talking with you about all this stuff. Thank you for taking the time.
Yeah, of course. I'm really excited to be talking to you about this stuff. I just think it's cool when any climber is willing to look into their mindset and perfectionism, everything that you're talking about.
Oh man, it's like my favorite chapter of conversation that I have with guests, as well as just, for myself, exploring what's happening between the ears. So yeah, this is cool. It's going to be great to dip into a lot of your experience and also the conversations that you've had with others who are leaders in the field as well. But before we fully, dive into this thing, it's the struggle, Neely, and this is your first time being on the show. And so I have to start by asking you the marquee question. Where do you struggle in your climbing? Or if you want to get specific about mindset, where do you struggle in your mindset in your climbing?
Oh, where do I struggle in my climbing? I struggle on slopers. I struggle right now due to pain that I'm having all over my body. And I have struggled a lot in the past with fear and self-doubt and self-loathing. But I've worked through a lot of that stuff, which makes it a lot more fun.
Yeah, you've really had some great episodes on that. Just one just recently as we're recording this that came out that kind of centered around fear as well. But you've also used yourself as kind of your own case study throughout, which has been nice to follow. And it's really nice to hear that you've made a lot of progress along that. And that's, an area that we're going to be exploring in this conversation here, of course, is on mindset and on perfectionism was one of the topics that kind of, I guess, was the impetus for me reaching out to you. You sent out an email. I'm on your email list, and you send out these great emails regularly on certain topics. Some of them are about fears, a fear of falling and that kind of thing. But the one that really, I guess, hit a soft spot with me, I guess, based on where I'm at currently was this email you sent that was kind of around perfectionism. And it just posed like a bit of a rhetorical question with regard to like having fun, and is climbing still fun, or has your perfectionism started to get in the way? And you had this external conversation kind of with yourself about perfectionism and how it's a good thing, but also could be getting in the way and affecting the fun that we're having in climbing. So anyway, I appreciate you sending that email, and I appreciate you being so open about your own journey, as you just shared there a little bit with some of your struggles. And maybe we could explore kind of what you were getting at with that email that you sent out around perfectionism and what you've heard from clients and kind of what brought that topic to mind and why you shared that.
Well, first, let me say that if you haven't read A Perfectionist's Guide to Letting Go, it's so good. And it really helped me a lot to understand what perfectionism is in this author's definition of it, and like how to embrace it really, and how to just notice it to make sure it's not taking over your life. So first things first is that. And
can you give us like, what is it, whether it comes from that book or just your own definition, like what is a perfectionist? Who are we?
Yeah, it's kind of like someone who sees an ideal and has the innate drive to strive for that ideal. And when she said that, I was like, wait, there are people who don't do that. And that's kind of what the book is about, is like, this is a gift that you have this drive to strive for ideals. And in climbing, it would be like, we get into climbing and we see the best climber and we want to be the best that we can be, at least. And so we're strive to do that by training and doing all this mindset work and everything else that we do. So that's, and that would be, you'd be a perfectionist in work if you did the same thing. So it's.
Yeah. And you noted in that message that you sent out, that's to kind of in many ways to be embraced. I mean, or to be celebrated, like as you were kind of self-describing yourself as having these perfectionist tendencies, which is like, this is maybe how we've excelled in school or professionally or in our hobbies. And so it's not that being a perfectionist is like this scarlet letter or this bad thing that, we want to get rid of. It's just maybe how do we understand if we kind of think of ourselves as this or we're exhibiting this kind of mentality, how do we look at climbing and maintain the fun of climbing, but also still maybe use that personality trait to excel in the sport that we love so much. And I'm assuming for a lot of people who are listening right now, and I would fall into this bucket, that I get really excited about improving my performance. Like not every day out is just like, oh, I want to go have fun today. Some of it's like, oh, I'm going to go like try really hard and probably get mad at this thing because it's not going to happen. But that's also kind of enjoyable. It's just that sometimes the scale tips and then maybe like it's not, all of a sudden I'm having a string of days where I'm like in a really bad mood. And then I catch myself and I'm like, wait a minute, why am I so mad at climbing right now?
Yeah. And these are the kinds of things that I talk about with my coaching clients all the time, because it's like, of course, climbing, we want it to be fun. But if we are striving to reach our potential as a human, that's hard. Like, that's challenging. And we have to accept that sometimes it's not going to be fun, like type 1 fun. But we have to decide then what it's worth. Like, how much suffering is it worth? And I've had these conversations where we actually quantify and qualify how much suffering do you want to endure for this goal, And I think that can be really helpful for people to like put it down on paper or get it out on the table and clarify, instead of just being like, no, I have to reach this goal at all costs, because that's kind of what's going through our minds when we get in those places, I think.
That is interesting, that exercise of quantifying. How does one quantify how much suffering there were? Like, how do you do that exercise with somebody? Well, you could do it with me. I could do it right now.
Yeah, let's do it. I mean, that's partly why we're here, for sure, is to get into your brain. So what does perfectionism look like to you? Like, what do you mean when you say perfectionist?
Well, I'll tell you kind of why. When you sent the email out, it was like in the late spring or early summer, and I was coming off of like the tail end of the spring season at the Red, and I basically accomplished nothing that I wanted to accomplish for that season. Like I set out, like I had, my seasonal goals, and I'd been working on this, climbing my first 513A, and it had taken me over a year, and I worked very focused and very dedicated at it. And then of course sprayed all about it on the show here in a number of ways. But I finally did it, which was great. And it was just amazing, magical moment. And it came together earlier in the fall season than I was anticipating. It was like my first real red point go of the season I sent, which was amazing. And then I had like a lot of like kind of secondary goals and all these things to like go through the spring. And I wanted to build the pyramid. So I went from kind of trying to move my top end up to building a pyramid. And so I'm like, okay, well, I've done 112C, 112D, 113A. And so, okay, I had conversation with like Eric Hurst and Nate Drolet, and we're like, okay, let's build the pyramid. And so I identified all these 12 Bs and Cs and Ds, and then essentially like epicked on 112C at the Red that I got like super close on, but never did, and didn't have much time to do anything else. And I will say that I had some fun trips in there. I went out and to Moab and climbed some cracks with Tom Randall, and like I had some cool like fun trips and that kind of thing. So I wasn't just like beating my head against like these goals or whatever. But when your email came in, I was like kind of bumming, to be perfectly honest. I was like, oh, I had this idea of like building this pyramid and getting out and actually accomplishing things in my mind, like objectives, like, okay, here's a list of routes and grades that I want to do. And having done basically none of them, then your email came in, and I was starting to feel like I wasn't having a lot of fun. Like my last day outside, I kind of turned to my buddies and I was like, I think I'm done outside for a while, and just kind of got excited to go to the gym and hop on the board and leave the baggage of the, nonsense at the red for a while. And it's been a little bit of time since that's happened now. So I've had a little bit more time to kind of reflect, and I'm not as like in as dark of a place, but it was pretty bleak for a bit there. So anyway, that's the context around when I originally read that email. And I think the perfectionism maybe comes in with, I'm kind of type A in that, where I like to have goals. I have plans and charts, and like I had this plan for the kind of winter spring season and essentially did none of it, and started to feel like I just wasn't a good climber, or like what, like I had done the big thing and now I'm like, but now I can't do anything. And so, yeah, I think I was just kind of bumming on myself.
Yeah, totally. I'm going to ask you a bunch of questions, but I want to say that I think that perfectionists kind of flock to climbing because it's so binary and it's so quantitative. It's like, exactly how good you are at something because there is a very finite grade associated with it. And so it makes sense that you as a type A person have these goals and they're very clear, very clear. It's not like you're surfing and like it's just different in other sports. So when you read that email, I'm curious, like, what kinds of things were you feeling? What emotions were you feeling? You said you were bumming, but what did that look like exactly?
Well, I was kind of just like feeling over climbing, to be perfectly honest. Like my psych level is crazy high for everybody who's listening and like listens to my intros and I share about, my journey. I'm like ultra psyched, and just kind of at the close of that spring season, I was not feeling psyched. I was just kind of like, I think I'm done with this for a bit, certainly outdoor climbing. And then I tried to kind of ignite the psych by moving indoors, which worked, which is kind of nice. Like I just shifted my sights to trying to climb arbitrary, the green problem in the corner at the gym or getting on the board and just like trying to pull hard on a couple of moves and not worry because they weren't goals. There was no pressure. But yeah, I think I was just feeling a little disappointed in myself because I felt that I had the fitness and the strength and the ability to do some of the things that I didn't do. And so like, I think I was just kind of like a little surprised and disappointed, and yeah, just maybe burned out, I guess. I was just kind of feeling a little bit burned out, kind of coming off that season because I didn't get, usually you get like the big win or you get like incremental wins. And so because I don't feel like I had many of those, and I didn't have like a singular red point project that, like when I was working on the Force for over a year, I didn't send it for a year, but I would high point or I would figure out new beta. And so there were those mini wins, but these like pyramid building things, I just kind of was bouncing around to different projects. And since none of them really came together, I just kind of felt like I wrapped up the season without anything to show for it,
Yeah. So we see that, and all of this is very understandable. And I think that a lot of people who are listening are fully relating to you right now. So like, I just want to validate that. I'm curious what fun is for you, because it sounds like it's very important for you to see progression in your climbing and for you to reach goals. And in goals, that means either making big links, getting farther on a project, or actually sending. So is that how you define fun in climbing? Because it gives you that feeling of satisfaction, of pride, of like bliss, of, everything we get from seeing obvious progression. Is that what fun is for you?
It's a tough one. That is fun. I do like that because I'm busy and the kids and all this stuff. Like I train a lot. And so when I do go outside, I like to kind of see the fruits of my training labors reflected in performance on rock. And that does feel good. And that's fun. I do have fun in other ways. I'll have fun, just like with the local crew here on a board session, and we're all trying different grades and it's not competitive and it's supportive, and that's like really cool. But I think very specifically to like when I go out to the Red River Gorge and I have to clear a day, which is a Herculean effort with the kids and the work and all that stuff. I clear a day and I go out there. I don't often go out to the red for just like quote unquote fun days or, you know, the faff around days where it's like, oh, let's just go try to climb as many 510s in the day as we can, which probably would be a lot of fun. Maybe I should do that more. But typically what happens is we go out there and there's like some sort of objective and we're either sussing a new project or we're trying to climb something that would be considered relatively hard for us. So like a hard in a day send or something like that. So often the trips out there are performance oriented. And in that sense, I do find it much more enjoyable. Like if there's like palpable progress or some wins, you know, where on the drive home, it's like, yeah, I felt good about that thing I did or whatever, you know, whereas if I go out there and I'm like, oh, I'm going to try and climb these 312Bs and I climb none of them, then it's like the drive home's usually not as fun. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah, I get it. I'm curious how you want to experience climbing, because basically what happened was you had these goals, you didn't reach them. It wasn't a binary thing whether or not you were, you know, good at this sport. Or, well, it was. You thought, I'm not good. And then you stopped having fun. And then you read my email about perfectionism. And how would you want to approach this?
Well, you know, I don't know if the answer is setting less lofty goals, because I do set fairly lofty goals. And part of it is like a self-fulfilling, you know, situation here because I have this podcast. And part of my journey that I share with the listeners are my goals that are lofty. You know, when I set the goal for 13A, I had done 112D, 112C, and then that took me like a year. And now the new goal is like the road to V8, and I've only climbed a V4 or maybe a V5 outdoors. And so like that's a big goal too. And so I like to set lofty goals because I get psyched about like, oh, okay, what's the pathway here and how do I work on this and how do I train? And so there's a lot of enjoyment that comes from goal setting and the work and the plan and the road that it takes to get there. But then on the other side, as I experienced in the spring, is it also kind of makes me vulnerable to feeling like I'm not accomplishing much. And so I'm not sure what a different way of fun would be. I could certainly try to set smaller goals or, you know, more kind of process mindset, which I've tried to work on. But as you noted with climbing, it's like there's grades and it's just there's a lot that's working against just going out and saying, I'm just going to focus on the process. But something that I could certainly benefit from and would love your thoughts on that.
All right, a couple thoughts here. One is you have this perfectionism for a reason, and we can get into that if you want. And maybe you've done therapy and found reasons why you have this, but
I have not.
You have not. Okay.
I probably should.
Happens, you know, as we're growing up. And I think it's also genetic, you know, like we have this in us. But also I think that sometimes we have a parent who is hard on us and they don't give us love unless we get really good grades, or we have a coach who's hard on us, or we get bullied. And so we don't want to stand out in any way from the crowd. So we need to be perfect in order to blend in and not get bullied. Like there are all kinds of reasons. And I talk to my clients about these things all the time. And it's really fascinating, honestly. I like how these things come about. And for you, it'd be interesting, I think, to figure out like where this perfectionism comes from and what it means for you to not send and to not reach these goals. Like what that means to you about you as a person. So does anything come up for you? Can you think of where this behavior tendencies might have come from?
Oof. Let me lay down on your couch, Neely, and
yeah, like, and we're not going to dwell here for very long, but sometimes it's like very succinct.
I mean, my parents have always been super supportive, so I don't think there's anything there. I definitely, yeah, like in middle school, I had like a period, like a year, where I was bullied like very, very heavily from my close group of friends. You know, like that 7th grade where like everybody turns on everybody at different times.
It's the worst.
That's the worst. It's so hard.
Yeah.
And I think ultimately it probably made me a better person, made me a more like empathetic person, because I was the bully before I got bullied. And then I got bullied for like relentlessly for like a year. And then I think ultimately, I think it probably helped me, but I bet there's some scar tissue deep down in there somewhere that I haven't dug too deep to unearth. I think just like social acceptance is because that is part of that clique or that community in school or just in life in general, which is like, oh, where do I fall on the social hierarchy? And that I think maybe is, I don't know, I'm just speaking from a male point of view here, but maybe it's even more acute for like men, which is like, oh, am I performing? Where am I lining up? Where am I stacking up in the pecking order of people? And, climbing's so funny because I'm not a competitive climber. I don't do competitions. I'm not literally like trying to measure myself against somebody else in a comp, but, within the community, and I'm a podcaster and, people follow my journey, maybe there is this sense that's subconscious, or maybe I'm dragging it up into the conscious right now where it's like, oh, if I'm not constantly improving or performing, is there a, imposter syndrome type thing that like comes into play? I'm not sure exactly where it is, but like I do feel for whatever reason, a sense of obligation or just like a drive to kind of constantly be getting better or improving. And so doing a 13A, but then not doing the 12C that I wanted to do hurt because I felt like I should have. And, maybe I was letting myself down or others down. It felt like a step backwards, and then a step backwards felt like I was failing.
Yeah. What you just touched on is, I think, at the core of everybody's issues, basically about everything, which is, and I've talked about this before on my podcast and other podcasts, but basically what you just said was, when I was bullied, I felt like I didn't belong. And so I learned, maybe you meant I learned how to be better in certain ways so that I would belong, or I'm not sure. But with climbing, it's the same. It's the same for everyone. Like, if I climb at this grade, I will belong officially. And sometimes people don't even have a grade in their mind. It's very arbitrary, which makes it worse. If I'm better, I belong. If I'm the best, I belong. And then if I don't do as well as that person, or if I don't do as well as me a year ago or whatever, then I don't belong. And that is terrifying to us as humans, because evolutionarily, we have to belong to a group in order to survive.
Right.
And so it makes sense. And like the status part of it, basically you were saying, like, where do I stand in the pecking order? And so of course we want to be at the top because that's the safest place to be in terms of belonging. And so when you didn't send things, there's this threat to your belonging in a community, especially a community that you love and want and then respect so much. So that's what I end up exploring a lot with people is, what does it mean to you to belong? And do you belong already? Because most always people are I have a community. I have people who love me, who support me, no matter what I climb. My friends are not going to care what I climb. They're still going to climb with me. Because a lot of times people are afraid, if I don't climb this thing, my friends are going to actually abandon me and not want to climb with me, which in some cases is true. And we have to confront that. Like, if I can't climb at this level, is this person going to want to go to these crags with me? Well, maybe not. Is that okay with you? Like, can you accept that? Instead of it just being this lingering like threat in the back of your mind. But is any of this resonating with you at all?
Yeah, I definitely, on that last point there, I think that kind of threat of losing community or friends is not like a literal or an actual possibility, because all the people that I climb with and meet up with and hang with, like, are all super supportive, and everybody climbs totally different grades. And also all the crags at the Red have like all the variety of climbs. There's not just like, we're going to the Fortress of Solitude where it's like, you have to be a 514 climber or whatever. So the kind of perceived threat of that, or kind of the evolutionary psychology of that, of kind of the wanting to belong in the community and there's safety in that community and all of that, that's come from hundreds of thousands of years. I think that is very real. And then, so then I guess it's just a question of, if we're all kind of experiencing this on some level, then how do some handle it better than others? Or what are some tools that I might be able to use to help me work through it?
So you have this perfectionistic drive in you, and it has told you for many, many years now you have to be the best. You have to be the best you can be. Like, strive. Just keep striving. You just told me that you're like overstoker, right?
Totally.
So, and that's part of where that comes from. And to be the best, you feel like you have to do X grade, build X hierarchy, your pyramid, whatever. But the only way out of that is to start cultivating other goals, other experiences that are fulfilling, and acknowledging those. So you mentioned earlier process goals, and you can definitely incorporate that into this, but also starting to commend yourself for little things that you've never commended yourself for before. That is honestly socially unacceptable to commend yourself for. So for instance, you come off of a climb and you're like, I breathed the whole way up that thing. I am so proud of myself. Or I just did a move that I didn't think I could do. Or I did, like whatever it might be. And we can go through a whole list of process goals that actually resonate with you, but also understanding exactly what it is you love about climbing and what's fun about it. So like being with your friends, being outside instead of in a house. Like if the drive is enjoyable for you, so you can listen to podcasts or, whatever these 100 things are that you love about climbing. And then at the end of your session, actually acknowledging those instead of taking them for granted. And I know this sounds very simple, but it changed my life for sure. Because I would, at the end of each session, and I've talked about this too, I would do my 3 questions. What went well? What am I grateful for? And what can I work on for next time? And sometimes it was about the climbing, and sometimes it wasn't. And that's what got me like out of my perfectionist box of I have to send in order to be a good person and in order to be happy.
So is that the 3 questions that you ask yourself there? You do that after every time out or every session that you do? What did I do well? What am I grateful for? And what could I work on?
No, what went well? What am I grateful for? And what can I work on for next time? So it's all very positive,
Yeah, I really like that. First of all, because I just like the way my brain works. I like systems. And so that's like the system. It's like, okay, here's the thing. It's like the postmortem. And typically, when I get home, I've got my climbing journal and I'll scratch down notes and, here's what I need to work on, or here's what happened. And usually it's very performance focused, I blew it at the 4th clip because I was too pumped, or I grabbed the hold wrong, or whatever. And so there isn't, it tends to be more kind of analytical than maybe emotional, if you will. But the what am I grateful for, what went well, both of those are kind of force one into like positive reflection, which I think is kind of cool, because I tend not to. I tend to maybe zero in on like, the last one. What could have gone better? And then I just dive into that for a paragraph.
Yes. And that's exactly, especially for men, I've found it's really hard for men to give themselves praise for anything besides sending. And even when people do send, a lot of times they're like, well, it must have been soft, or like I did it. I didn't do it in a very elegant way, so it doesn't count, or whatever. Like it's really hard for people to give themselves credit. So we're just walking around with one objective, like one metric of success, which is sending. And that is so not fun.
Right.
And that's perfectionism in a nutshell, is like this one little thing is perfect and I must be perfect.
Yeah, it really is interesting what you touched on there with regard to, and maybe it's to your point, you see it more with male clients, but even when we do the thing, sometimes we like undercut the thing, like the success of the thing or the enjoyment of it. And I do notice this, I don't know if you notice this as well, but like in climbing culture in general, there is seems to be like a historical kind of undertone of humble to the point of like almost being self-deprecating, like sandbagging climbs, or kind of finding ways to say, I just eked this one out, or, I got really lucky on that thing. Now, maybe that's better than the other end of the spectrum, which is just like intense cockiness and ego and bravado, where it's just like, I'm the best, I cruise everything or whatever. Like, that's kind of gross too. But it does seem to me, at least in a lot of the conversations that I have, and I talk to a lot of professional climbers, as do you, where it's great to talk to somebody who's like an absolute crusher and they're just like super humble about it. And like Tommy Caldwell comes to mind. I don't know. He just like double downgraded like an insane 14D that was in Tahoe. He like called it like 14B, and we're all like, come on, Tommy, you know, but because like sometimes humble goes to the point where then you're not giving yourself flowers for the things that you've done.
Yeah, exactly. And you're not giving anybody else flowers for what, you know, like there's this culture of, oh, well, it doesn't count because it took them over 20 tries or whatever.
Right.
Or like, you know, you could have said that to yourself about the force. Like, oh, well, it doesn't count really because it took me so long or
right.
whatever. Like, I'm not trying to undercut what you did at all, but this is something that people do.
Sure.
And so like that humility that we see modeled for us has really taken a lot of the joy away, I think, from climbing and being able to give ourselves credit. Like, I will come down off of a climb and fall all over it and be like, that was fucking awesome. I just did that move and I didn't think I could do that move. You know, and like people have commented to me on, they're like, wow, I can't, you're being really positive about this. That's cool. Maybe.
Is that something that you worked on? It sounds like it's something that you've been working on, because can you tell me like what would you have done? I don't know how many years ago this was, but prior to the work that you've done, if you
I would have cried. I would have come down like yelling and degrading myself.
Really?
Which is not fun for me. It'd be like, I'm not good enough to even exist right now. Like that's how intense it felt for me.
Wow.
I am so ashamed of myself. How dare I even be trying this thing? Or, you know, like it got really intense sometimes. And I think it gets intense for a lot of people. And now I'm just much more present and accepting of where I'm at with climbing. And that's all I am trying to get people to be. It's not like I'm not striving. I feel like you can strive and accept where you are at the same time. And that is the crux for perfectionists. And
so for you on your journey from coming off of the climb where you fell, you know, at every bolt and were swearing or, you know, berating yourself and even feeling like unworthy to even be on the climb, to now where you fall on every bolt, but then you come down and you're celebrating doing a move that was, you know, really hard and you're really proud of. How long was that journey, and what for you, and I know it's probably quite individual, but what for you were the most impactful changes that you made or tools that you implemented to get you from point A to point B?
I feel like it was a couple years of work, and some of the things that I had to do were like really explore my comparison with others, especially my good friends who were climbing at a similar level, and to explore why it was so important for me to send things or send a certain grade. And it came down to like, I didn't think I was good enough if I didn't. And I really, really craved respect from others. But what I realized was I had respect and I didn't need everybody's respect all of the time. Like it was mostly just about like me enjoying myself as much as I could. So it was getting into the deeper things, and then it was practicing after every session. This is what went well. This is how I can praise myself. This is how I can be grateful for things other than sending. This is how I can think of what could have gone better in a more positive way and like be excited to work on it instead of like, you know, self-flagellating for not having done the thing in the first place.
Yeah. This is what went well. This is what I'm grateful for. And this is something I'm excited to work on. I think are 3 cues that I'm going to implement myself. Do you do those after gym sessions as well? Or is this outdoor climbing only?
Yeah, sometimes I will do it after gym sessions, but like, especially if I'm projecting something, it's because that's when it's so easy to get into the mindset of I suck.
Right.
And nothing went well. And so with that, I will do it with my partner. And it's more concretizing, I think, too. Say it out loud and then have them say their things to you, because that also gives you perspective. Because sometimes they're like, I'm really grateful that I got to watch you on this climb and see you try so hard or something. Like it can also be like really reflective.
Well, this brings up a question that somebody had sent in along the lines of this. And I'm not going to use listeners. I'm not going to use their names because I'm not sure if I'll just use like the first letter of their name. So Jay wrote in and said, I tend to overlook my progress and fixate on what I did wrong, letting one mistake outweigh all my wins. It feels like I'm only as good as my worst moment. I can accomplish 10 things well, but if I make one mistake, that single moment becomes the headline. I forget the wins, the effort, the growth, and instead I define myself by the flaw, the thing that I didn't do right. It's kind of a mental tunnel vision where success feels temporary or insufficient, while failure feels permanent and defining. Mm-hmm. How does that strike you?
Yeah, I think this is super common. Okay, so the other thing that's super important here for you too, and for me along my journey, has been to validate that. Like you're out, you're climbing, you're doing really well, and then you slip off the top and you could have sent, you should have, in quotes, sent.
Right.
But you don't, and so you just like are really upset with yourself. So the first thing that we have to do here is acknowledge that. Like, because what we want to do and we're kind of trained to do is to be like, to feel the thing, to shame ourselves for feeling the negative thing, to be frustrated that we're feeling that, and to try to push it away and be like, well, it's okay. I'll always have next time. Or it's okay. A lot of people slip off of that, like it's okay. And what we could do to actually make it go away is to say to ourselves, I really thought that I could send it, and I'm super disappointed that I didn't. It would have meant a lot to me to have done that thing second go, because that would have proven to me that all of my hard work is paying off. And I'm really sad because this means a lot to me. And just like sit with it for a second. Like that is what validation is acknowledging that you're feeling a thing and validating it to yourself. You don't have to do this with anybody else. Like sometimes I will sit on the rope after falling and validate myself. And when you start doing this, you can do it really quickly. And that for me is like, when I hear that, like can feel it, it's relief. And that's what we're looking for. And then we're able to be like, okay, but I can come back and do it next time. I'm really excited. And this is what I can work on. And this is what went well. And like celebrate your victories since you have grieved, the thing that you're upset about. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it really does. I love just taking that moment on the rope for those of us who climb on ropes, or if you're bouldering, just on the pad for a second there before engaging with the crew or your friends or anything, and just taking that moment to validate whatever you're feeling, validate it because it's an emotion that came up. I like that. That's a really nice cue there. In terms of how we then kind of, as this person Jay had written in, how we carry that on. As he was saying, the successes are temporary, but the failures seem more permanent. Like he's kind of defining himself by the things he missed rather than things he hit. And this gets into a little bit of like, how do we identify ourselves? Am I a climber? Am I a 513 climber? Am I a whatever, am I a advanced climber? Am I beginning? Like we kind of put these labels on ourselves. And I don't know if this is, this person didn't provide any other information there. So we might just have to take some guesses here. But essentially, I think what they're saying is that even the biggest wins tend to fade faster than a small error. And how do you work with clients when that kind of imbalance exists?
I mean, I think that is just an erosion that takes place over time. It's a conscious choice that you have to make to, first of all, see that you're doing this to yourself on a regular basis, notice that you're doing it, and then validate yourself, and then redirect to, but this is what did go well. And it's not necessarily like always having to pat yourself on the back. Like I read The Zen of Climbing, Which by Francis Sanzaro.
Sanzaro. Yeah, and you and I have both have him on the show, and I've had a great conversation with him. I like a lot of his perspectives.
Yeah, and this is where this comes in, because like the amount of pride that we have in anything, it kind of translates to how much shame we have about a thing. And what Francis is trying to say in the book is like, just try to be in the middle about it all. Like, you don't have to identify with what you did. You don't have to think that it was stupid or that you're bad or you're not good enough. You can just say like, I'm a human climbing on this arbitrary rock, trying to do this arbitrary thing. And my human body didn't do the thing that I wanted it to do. And I don't have control over that. So like detaching a little bit and being a little bit more neutral with it, like in practicing that. And that's really hard, but I think it comes with practice.
Yeah, well, I agree. I loved the conversation that I had with him, and also read the Zen of Climbing twice. Of course, Zen is a lifelong pursuit. And so where Francis is at and where I'm at is there's a huge chasm in between. But that point is well made, which is the extremes are kind of where the issues can lie, in either extreme pride or extreme, feelings of failure or inadequacy. But for those of us who, even if we are kind of a little bit more in the middle, who just tend to lean more towards or focus more on the negatives, and I think that's evolutionary. I think that's quite common. The kind of like the negative bias it's just what's kept us alive for a million years, which is just like those who focus on the things that could go wrong are the ones that have stayed alive and passed on their genes. And so there's like a little bit of that negative confirmation bias that's just ingrained in us. But how do we, as this is a hobby for 99% of the people who are listening to this conversation right now, we're just trying to go out there and have fun and push ourselves, but we're wanting to push ourselves to have fun, not because we're going to get a life-changing, check or brand endorsement or whatever. Like there is no prize at the top of my first 13A, aside from what I felt internally, right? And so for those of us who are a little bit more, just leaning towards the negative, like the person who wrote in there is it this sense, like this exercise that you've done where we're just kind of reflecting at the end of each session more in the gratitude and what went well sense? Or are there other things that you recommend that will help to kind of reprogram us in the sense, or rewrite those scripts in our minds where we aren't just always defaulting to the thing that went wrong?
I mean, I do really think that, yes, those 3 questions are super important, but also in the moment, like when you are downgrading yourself or downgrading the climb because you did it and it must be easy, or like all these things that we do to shit on ourselves, those things are there for a reason. Those are the things that have gotten us to successes in our lives, right? Like that's probably how that person got good grades, is by flagellating about a B, or like getting actually punished for a B by somebody else, or whatever it might be. And that's what drives you to be better, right? But I think one of the things that I had to also come to with all of this was like thinking of what kind of coach I was being to myself. Because if we think of like football coaches, like your stereotypical football coach who's like really mean and kind of bullying and criticizing and insulting. And that's kind of what a lot of us are doing in our own heads, because we believe, and I've had conversations with pro climbers about this, we believe that if it's not that kind of coach, we're not going to be motivated enough to do the thing that we want to do. And I think that's what needs to also be examined, is like, if I am kind to myself, and I had this with body image too. I used to be really hard on myself about my body, and I think a lot of us are. And it was this coach in my head that was like, you are disgusting, like all this nasty language to myself. And I figured out in therapy, like if I don't talk to myself this way, I feel like I'm just going to let myself slide, and I'm going to get to a place that I don't want to be. And so recognizing what those voices in your head are telling you and trying to play around with what would a kind coach say to you. They might say like, good try, you might need to go do some drills in order to work on this, precise skill, or, what do you have control over, and work on that instead of like, oh, I'm short and I hate being short. I'm so mad at everybody around me because I'm short, things like that.
Well, man, there is such a crossover with this, because it sounds like you were working with a therapist, not like a sports psychologist, but an actual therapist, which for me, I had a conversation not too long ago with Coach Belinda Fuller, and she was saying something similar, which is like, look, you could probably train your fingers for 10 years to do that project, or maybe the thing that's holding you back is like doing a little bit of therapy, and
yeah, exactly.
So maybe the takeaway here is that myself and everyone listening should go and get a little bit of therapy. But if we keep it focused on climbing here for a little bit, kind of piggybacking on that last person's question, I've got a couple others that kind of danced around in this area, and I want to see if you have specifics on how you or have worked on them yourself, or how you work with clients on them. One of them is about, this kind of resonates with part of my journey that I told you about this spring. They write in and they say, how do I not feel like I'm regressing if I'm not sending my normal grades?
I think that's such an interesting question. And I don't want to be insulting here, but it's so American. It's so like,
right.
How can I avoid feeling these negative feelings, and that's basically what they're saying. Like, how can I avoid the hurt that goes along with not doing as well as I did before, or not doing as well as somebody else, or whatever it is. And the fact is that you might be regressing. And that's something, again, it's like this confrontation of truth. Like, this is just what is, potentially. And this can happen, if you're working on a project and you get really specialized at that project, that type of climb, that length of climb, blah, blah, blah. And then you try to go do other things, like, you might have regressed. And what does that mean to you? Does that mean you're not a good person? Does that mean that this voice is just really loud saying you're not good enough? Does that mean that you have lost your status in the climbing community? Does that mean that your friends might abandon you? Like, what does that actually mean to you? And why is it not okay? Because if we can just confront it, this is the truth, then we can think about what we have control over and what we don't. Well, if I'm regressing, what is actually going on here? Like, what are my weaknesses that I'm sensing? Is it endurance? Like, maybe I lost some power endurance. Maybe I need to go do some work on that, and whatever it is. And instead of it being this emotional thing, like, not take it personally and just be objective about it and do the thing that needs to happen.
Yeah, that's really interesting, because in how you just addressed that, you kind of touched on a performance element and also like an emotional or kind of psychological self-worth element. On the performance side, I think if I'm understanding your point correctly, maybe regression isn't a bad thing. Like, we immediately think of regression as like, oh, this is a negative. I'm going to define myself negatively as a result. But maybe regression, to your point, is like, oh, I was really specialized in a 100-foot climb, and then I couldn't do this like super punchy 40-foot climb.
Yeah.
That isn't on its face a bad thing. It's like, oh, here's new information. Let me take this information in. And it is interesting to see, for those who follow like the pro climber scene closely, like I do, I'm sure you do as well. You'll see somebody do the hardest thing, and then they'll post for 6 months, maybe they'll have done the latest V17, and for months they'll post V13s and 14s and 15s. And the catty way to look at that would be like, oh, they're regressing, but maybe they're just like out building the toolkit for the next thing, or just having fun, or getting fit, or, whatever it is. It's like, we can't, if we did a V17, it's not like next week we can go out and do a V18 and then
right.
a V19.
Exactly.
Right?
We expect so much from ourselves, and it's really unrealistic. No, we're not always going to be peaking, and we don't always want to be peaking, because it's mentally draining to do that. To like always projecting at our hardest.
What's your perspective on how we reframe, or just, actually set like parameters or expectations for times at which we should be trying to peak and times at which we should not be?
I mean, I think that that's completely up to the person and their goals and everything, like when the peaks should happen. And I'm like not I'm not a climbing coach, but I think that we see professional climbers, like you said, they ebb and flow and ebb and flow. And it's not like it's not like Adam Ondra is always trying 515D, he's
Right.
not. He's like out there on sighting 14Ds and 14As and 13As. And that's what is refreshing for him. And he is a professional climber. That's his actual job. And what I think that most climbers fail to really acknowledge is how much stress they have in their lives outside of climbing, and with their jobs, their kids, their relationships, their everything. And then they take that to the crag with them, especially because we have pretty bad coping skills and we don't know how to like transition from one situation to the next. And we expect the most from ourselves when climbing could be more of an outlet for that stress more of the time, especially because we are normal people. We're not professional climbers. And so to just give ourselves the grace and have even a plan. And I think that's where a good coach would come in. It's like, this is Alex Steiger, our coach, one of our coaches here, calls it a want day. And so it's like whatever you want to do. And it sounds like you were kind of touching on that is something that you could have done maybe in order to not get burned out when you did.
Sure.
Where you're like, yeah, I don't have that many days out, but I feel myself sinking in my psych levels and I need some wins and I need fun. I need to feel like I'm flowing on the rock. I'm going to go do some 511Cs today. That's my favorite grade. And I'm just going to go do 3 of them and I'm going to have the time of my life.
Yeah. I tend to like schedule a lot or set goals. And oftentimes my seasonal goals are what's the next hardest thing I'm going to do or whatever. Maybe the goal of setting some of those fun days could be good. And I actually not too long ago started, as part of my monthly goals, started putting in just days outside rather than like, oh, I want to go try this XYZ grade. It's just like, oh, okay, I want to get 4 days outside this month. And so that kind of released part of the pressure valve. But then inevitably, the text goes around with the group and then we end up going and getting on like something that's hard and like takes a full day to do or not do. And so again, maybe I've started with the right idea of going days outside, but then I need to maybe further give myself the want days. I kind of like the want day there, but like, okay, so 3 days outside and 1 want day where it's just like, okay, let's go faff around and, it's still climbing, it's still training, it's still work. It's still going to elevate her up to the next highest grade, but it's also...
Whoa. Do you see what you just did there?
Shit.
Do you see what I'm saying?
Yeah.
You're like, oh, well, this is still productive. And
Right.
so I am allowed to do it. No.
I can't have that?
Has to go. I mean, a lot of, you can, but if you're trying to be less hard on yourself, that's what has to go.
Yeah.
Like it can just be a climbing day that you love just because you want to do that. Like it's not your job.
You're right. It's not my job. I could just go have a dang climbing day that I love. All right. Okay. I appreciate it. So I did need to hear this. Okay, great. Well, I don't know if this dovetails into this next person's question that I touched on earlier, but I want to try to address it, which is they ask, how do I separate myself from the outcome-driven mindset and focus onto process focus? So outcome mindset versus process mindset. We've been hearing a lot about process mindset kind of in the community. Maybe you could touch on what that even is, but also, as you noted astutely at the top of this conversation, climbing is different than surfing and many other kind of sports or pastimes or hobbies where, for better or worse, there are grades that are given to things, whether people agree with them or not. Like they're just kind of always there. And a lot of outcomes are tied to grades. Now, this person didn't specifically say the outcome was tied to a grade, so I might be putting my own thing on there because mine, road to 13 and road to V8 is like, I'm very grade outcomed, and then I find the project that fits in with the grade. This person, their outcome might just be, I want to send this route. Either way, they're asking kind of how does one then shift to emphasizing more about the process than just the end result?
Yeah. I'm assuming that the outcome is usually going to be, I want to send this thing, or I want to one-hang this thing, or whatever it might be. So the first thing that needs to happen is, he said, or she, I don't know who it was, but they said, how do I separate myself from the outcome goals. And I think that's the thing that we also need to work on is we're never going to separate ourselves from the goal, especially if we're perfectionists. That's okay. Like, we're perfectionists. We want that goal. We're hungry for it. Like, I love sending shit. I love it.
Yeah.
And we all do. Like, it's so gratifying for most of us. So, like, just acknowledging the fact that it is okay, because a lot of times we're like, oh, it doesn't matter. This is just supposed to be fun and none of this matters. But truthfully, it does matter to us. Like, we wouldn't spend all this time, money, energy on it if it didn't matter. So First of all, it's okay that the outcome matters. And I think that that in itself can be really relieving for people to just accept. It's okay. But if we're trying to get a little distance from it, this is where, like, I will make giant lists with people about what kind of process goals will actually light them up. So I'll ask you, what kind of process goals can you even think of? Because a lot of times we can't even think of them because we're so not used to that way of thinking. So what could you think of that is not sending that could be a goal or an intention during climbing?
With like a specific route in mind, like, oh, I want to get a new high point, or is that just basically like the equivalent of just saying I'm sending?
That's kind of outcome, yeah.
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 That's a good question. For me, I like it when I'm able to climb and fall and not think about the fall until I'm at the end of the rope. You know, like essentially fall while making moves rather than, call take. I like to be able to laugh a lot at the crag with my friends and hike around and enjoy the beautiful scenery. I don't know if that's a little bit, no, I'm like going too far away from climbing. I'm like, I like the things when I'm not climbing. I don't know.
Think about anything else on a route that might be.
I've been working on inside edge flagging recently, or like back flagging, which is a move that does not come innately to me. And so one of the things that I want to do more is try to incorporate that into my climbing, or like, use that technique to clip, and just try to get it more kind of ingrained in my toolkit, which I know is going to take some practice. So I think, adding that, maybe it's like adding that to some warm-ups, or just even adding it to whatever route that I'm working on, even if it ultimately doesn't end up working, but just like consciously trying to work that move in more so that I can add it to my toolkit. I think that'd be a good one for me. Climbing faster is something that I really want to work on. So yeah, again, not quite sure like where I would fit that in, but essentially just trying to speed up more, spend less time holding on to small holds, that kind of thing, work through sequences faster. That's a few. I mean, my big goal for the winter is going to be bouldering, and I'd like just almost never boulder outside. So there's probably a lot of things that I could do there, like learn how to build a good landing and clean and rest properly in between, and try really hard off the ground, because it's really hard for me to like immediately try hard. I usually have to kind of work my way up into trying hard because I'm doing routes. So yeah, probably a bunch of process type things on the bouldering side as well. That's just kind of what immediately jumps to mind.
Okay. There's some good ones in there.
And then also send the thing.
Send the thing? Yeah. That's your process goal?
Send it.
Okay. But let's not forget, Neely, sending the thing is the most important part.
Do the thing. Be a hero. Yeah.
Yeah, it's interesting because we all send things when we're least expecting it, and we want to bottle that feeling of having no expectations. Those are the moments when we don't care. And so like trying to cultivate that feeling is really useful, and that's way easier said than done. But I want to go through some of these process goals, and I'm going to add some of my own in, and we can get more structural about these process goals, so they're not just like, oh, I'm going to try hard, which is my main process goal. Whenever I feel anxious when I'm stepping up to a climb, my cue, I'm like, oh, I'm anxious. So that's my cue to be like, all I can do is try hard. And even trying hard, we can kind of qualify over time. I think a lot of people stop climbing when it feels hard, and learning to like even having a goal of when I have the feeling of I want to let go or say take, I'm going to do another move. So like climbing through a pump. And then next time I'm going to do 3 more moves, even though I'm scared, even though I might not make it to the next bolt or whatever it is. Like quantifying and having that kind of process goal can be really engaging and also super useful because you're building endurance, you're building your capacity for discomfort, all of these things. So one of the biggest process goals that I had to do when I was working with Hazel Finlay, we pinpointed that I do not like being uncomfortable. And so my only goal on my project the next time I went out was to climb even though I was very uncomfortable and embrace the discomfort. And I got a high point that day and I hung, or like I did the best that I had done. And so like that could be, and I think a lot of us we don't want to be uncomfortable. And so that could be a process goal. And then the hard moves above the bolt, this is something that I've done so many sessions on, just this exact topic with people, is because it's a lot of people's fear. It's because we're out of control. We don't know what the falls are going to be like. And so the only way to get through that is to do some exposure with it. So I'll tell people, and it was so cool. I had this client who I told to do this with one climb. And after that one climb, he just became a different climber. He started sending things that were harder for him, blah, blah, blah. So it can be very fast. But what you do is you find a climb, because it's easy to get on a 5/8 or whatever and just be like, okay, falling, and then let go, which like you said, it's completely different than actually trying hard. So we need to, learn what these falls are going to be like understand the physics of the falls. So that's where fall practice does come in handy, because you can fall from anywhere and be like, okay, well, I was there when I fell and now I'm here and nothing bad happened. And do I need to adjust anything with my belayer, blah, blah, blah. So all of that comes into play here. But when you're really getting to this point, you find a climb that's above your on-site level that you know you're probably going to fall on or have troubles with. You get to a point on it where, like at the bolt, there's hard moves, and you do one hard move up past your bolt. And hopefully it's so hard that you're going to fall. So you're taking a fall on purpose above your bolt, and then you're learning the moves as you go up it, and you're falling progressively higher. That's the goal.
Yeah.
And because then you can say, like, I fell, and then you fell out of control, and you can see, like, even though I was kind of tilted this way, or my leg was sort of right here near the rope, or whatever it is that you're scared of, you were fine, hopefully. Or like if you need to adjust anything with your belayer, you can. And I highly encourage people to be very direct with their belayers, because this is what holds a lot of people back. So that exercise alone can be a process goal within a session, because all you're trying to do is get used to climbing or going for it above your bolt. And so like the crux with that is to have people forget about sending. Like that's not the goal for this go, at least. The only goal is getting used to falling, which will help you send later on.
Yeah, I love the idea of finding a climb where there's limit moves, because I used to have a real debilitating fear of falling that I worked on for years. But on my best days of climbing, I don't think about the fall. I'm just thinking about trying to master each move and try as hard as I can. And when I fall, I don't know I'm falling. I just am all of a sudden bouncing at the end of the rope. And so there isn't a whole lot of room in the brain, if you're trying to perform at your limit, to think about falling while you're thinking about making hard moves. You want to just think about making the hard moves, and then the fall either happens or doesn't happen. But I can see how specifically what you're just saying there could be very beneficial with that.
Yeah, exactly. There are all kinds of other process goals, and I'll just name a few of them, which is memorizing beta. This is a big one. Like you could just have a goal of getting to know the crux and doing it 6-8 times on one go.
I like that.
Clipping, understanding clipping better. Like I'm going to try to get better at clipping, and I'm going to try a few different kinds of clipping. I'm going to understand the stances that I need, especially on this one route. doing fall practice of any kind, breathing, like I'll have routes where I'm like, the only goal I have here is to breathe the entire way. Blair, can you please remind me to breathe if you don't hear me audibly breathing?
Mm-hmm.
Trying hard is really something that you can quantify and qualify. Like, what does it actually feel like to try hard? How hard am I willing to try? And like finding that limit there, because I think a lot of people are just not trying very hard and they don't even know what that feels like. And so like really getting to know, oh yeah, this is what trying hard feels like. I am hyperventilating and I feel like I'm going to throw up. This is trying hard.
And that was something that you've worked on.
Yeah, for sure. Like I didn't know how to try hard until I started moonboarding like 4 years ago. And that's when I started screaming. I was like, oh, this is why people scream. They're trying hard and it helps you try hard.
Right.
And now I've taken that into route climbing.
Oh, that's great. I like that tip. Okay. So look, if for those who are listening, if you're not screaming, you might have opportunity to try a little harder.
I mean, my husband tries pretty hard and I don't think he's ever screamed in his life. So I don't think it's requisite, but for me. And then resting is another one. People are very bad at resting. And so like just taking time to rest on a route and learn what that feels like. Or like I had a project where there was a rest stance that I could stay in for a long time. And I would just play around with how long I should rest there in order to be completely ready to go. And I would have my partner time me. So I knew exactly how many minutes I needed to rest. And that can be really, really helpful. So those are some process goals that you can play around with. And the more you have learning, because like learning is very satisfying. And we can figure that out. Like we do these things and we have success, we learn something and we're like, that was very fulfilling and I didn't send. And so you can see that climbing can be fulfilling without sending. It's just practice though.
And then with those processes, do you recommend that people identify those prior to the day? So, okay, I'm driving to the crag. One of my goals today is that I want to work on my resting. I want to rest better. Or one of my goals today is I want to climb at least one move through discomfort. And so you kind of outline those ahead of time so that after the fact, the goal for the day wasn't I want to send the route, or maybe that is a goal, but you have these other goals as well. So at the end of the day, you can still go back and say, I'm proud of myself. One of the things that went well is I worked on my resting. So do we identify them beforehand and then reflect on them afterwards?
I think for people like you and me and a lot of people who are very perfectionistic, yes, I think it's super helpful. Because if you don't, you're going to get to the gym and you're going to be like, that looks like a really great project I want to send.
Yeah.
And then you just do that, totally. And you're like, oh, screw it. But if you have an assignment, then that's very concrete. And you're like, no, I have my assignment. And then maybe I can do that thing. But, you at least have some concrete things that you need to accomplish.
I really like that a lot. Did anything else stand out on the process goals of mine that I shared with you? Or
For sure. Okay, so you said climb faster. And Alex Steiger has also talked about this. So I'll credit her here. Like she's coached me on this. And one way that you can learn, because you can say, oh, I'm going to try to climb faster. But like, what does that actually mean? And so when you start to break these things down, that's when they can become more of process goals. So she would have me do a boulder problem, time it, and then try to double that time. Or like at least make better time the next time I went up the boulder. And she would have me do the same boulder like 5 times so that I could get really, really good at speed climbing, basically.
Okay. Yeah.
And you could do the same thing where you're like, okay, can you time me on this crux? I'm going to climb from these 2 bolts and see what it is and then come back down and rest and try to do it much faster and more fluid. So just like making it more concrete, I think is helpful.
Yeah.
Bouldering outside, I think your goal of just days outside is good just because you know that bouldering outside is going to give you the skin and it's going to give you some more skills and it's going to like get you acclimated. And yeah, those were the main ones that I noted of yours.
Cool. We got one last question here from a listener, and I think maybe this can wrap up this portion of the conversation here. And I thought this was really interesting, the way that they phrase this. And this person said that my biggest mindset challenge right now is that I'm trying to work on how to be excited the morning of a day that I'm going to go lead climbing. I'm able to control my fear of falling when climbing and when I'm out there, but I still feel negative and hesitant like the evening before the climbing day and the morning of. I find myself making excuses and almost hoping that a reason comes up that I don't get to go climbing.
I know. I remember back in the day, I'd be approaching a crag and my partners would be like, oh, look at it. It looks so amazing. And I'd just be like, oh, I'm so scared, just really nervous. I will say that one of the clients I had just mentioned earlier, who I had him do the fall practice of when he is on something hard for him and he's actually doing moves that are hard for him above his bolt. He was very scared of that. And that would keep him from being excited about climbing. He would dread his climbing sessions. And so once he did that and he understood the falls and he was just more used to it and more confident and more intentional about it, he started becoming more excited about his climbing sessions. And it happened overnight, literally. And so I do think that if this person is really scared and they're just managing their fear out there, they could probably be more intentional about taking practice falls out there and being very communicative with their belayer. I don't know if their belayers are giving them bad catches or if they're on stuff. Like sometimes people will go to climbing areas and they're climbing on like 5'10s and they're like, I don't know why I'm so scared. They're not scared, but legit they're on these like 5'10s that are dangerous.
Right.
Because you know how it is. A lot of 5'10s, 5'9s are dangerously bolted, especially if that's your limit. And so I'll be like, why don't you try something harder at different areas and just project? Just because the bolting is better, it's going to take you longer to do these things. But like, if that's your jam and you don't want to be scared all the time, then don't get on those 5'10. Like, I don't climb 5'10s like that. It's terrifying. No, thank you.
I like that. Just so with that client that you were mentioning, once they found the right climb that did have the safe bolting and they pulled really hard moves on that and took those falls, then if they were waking up or they're getting ready to go back out to that climb to try to red point it, it had kind of removed some of the unknown, some of the mystery, the fear that's wrapped up in that, so that they were more excited about that. And I'm not quite sure this person who wrote in exactly their situation, but yeah, we want to be excited about going climbing. I mean, ideally, like we don't want to wake up and have a tree limb fall on our car so we can't drive out to the crag and be like, oh, good. I don't have to go get on lead again. And so, we want to have that excitement. And do you ever recommend that people just go top rope instead or
all the time. Yes, absolutely. If lead climbing is not your thing, don't do it. You don't have to do it. It's not your job. Who cares?
Right.
If all you want to do is top rope, just go top roping. But, and I do want to clarify that with that client, he just went into the gym and got on a random climb and did this fall practice. And it was like a light switch went on for him. He was like, this isn't dangerous. I am okay. And so that he was able to extrapolate to all kinds of climbs.
Okay. It's just that it was a hard climb. It wasn't going into the gym on a 5'6". It was going into the gym on a hard climb to do those hard moves. Gotcha.
Exactly.
Yeah, that's cool. And yeah, no doubt. I mean, top rope climbing, God, I love top rope climbing. It's freaking awesome. It's so fun. But I'm driven to want to red point a route, and I think this person who wrote in is as well. And so I think, your point well made. None of us need to be doing this, but if we want to do it and we want to get better at it, have the fun days, whatever those may be, sub-maximal days or top rope days or whatever. But then if you really do want to get out there on a hard red point and there's that fear that's negatively impacting the stoke or just the motivation to get out, there are ways to address that fear of falling.
Yeah. The main thing here is like, get to know what is holding you back and confront it and do something about it. If you're scared, what exactly are you scared of?
Right.
And have a conversation with somebody about that. Like really get into the nitty gritty. What can I take control of here? What needs to change?
Dig it. Neely, thanks so much. If people do want to work with you, how do they work with you?
They can go to TrainingBeta.com and there's a little mindset tab at the top. And then you can find all of my services there. I work with people all over the world. I do sessions on Zoom. They're an hour long and people can do one session at a time or they can buy 4 at a time. So yeah, just TrainingBeta.com.
Right on. Yeah. Thank you so much. This is awesome talking with you. I appreciate it.
Yeah. Thank you. I loved it. All right. I hope you enjoyed that episode from the Struggle Climbing Show. Again, that was Ryan Devlin interviewing me. And I really appreciate him giving me this copy of the interview to publish on the TrainingBeta podcast. I think it's good for both of our audiences to hear this kind of content. So again, if you want to work with me, you can go to TrainingBeta.com, and we have all kinds of resources there for you as well. We have climbing training programs that are online. We have climbing coaching with Alex Steiger and Matt Pincus. I do mindset coaching, but I also do nutrition coaching. And we also have injury protocols from Jared Vagey, and tons of blog posts, tons of podcast episodes. So it's all at trainingbeta.com. I'll be back with a new episode next week. So thanks so much for listening all the way to the end, and I'll talk to you then.